This is pristine land that has an amazing diversity of plants and animals, and a true experience for our students and for faculty to get their hands dirty and really understand what it is to be part of the world around them and to be part of this amazing environment right here in New Jersey.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the 2021 presentation of Ars Vitalis, the New Jersey New Music Forum. I'm Artistic Director Matthew Halper, Professor of Music at Kean University. Well, the last year's been quite trying. Obviously, we've had a lot of challenges. The pandemic has, posed many challenges and, of course, put many constraints on our lives. But luckily, 7 years later in the making, Kean University has just opened this beautiful Skylands campus in Oak Ridge, New Jersey, as part of the Kittatinny State Parks. So we are giving you something unique and special. I think it's quite appropriate for Earth Day, for Earth Week, that we give you a live presentation outside, something safe, but something also to enjoy the beauty of the Earth and the beauty of this unique campus. Joining me today is my co-hosts and co-moderators, John Kurzweil. John Kurzweil is a Grammy Award-winning engineer and operations director at the Metropolitan Opera. He's also a composer and a very fine percussionist, good friend and colleague. And online at the helm, I don't know if we could see him right now, but Vijay Manzo is running the show from the Master Control Center. Vijay is a professor at the Worcester Polytechnic Institute. He's a professor of music, composer, and technologist, and he is also author, I should say co-editor of the book Environmental Sound Artists in Their Own Words, I believe is the name of the title. It's on Oxford University Press, and one of the featured authors in that book is David Rothenberg, today's guest artist. But before I introduce David, I thought one of the most appropriate ways is to use a little bit of video to show you what David does. Then we'll talk about what David does.
I'm so happy to be invited today to play along with this distinguished orchestra. These guys are really old school, and there's so much wisdom you can hear from them, the real greats. We've got Carolina ground crickets, bush katydids, tree crickets, and a whole distinguished ensemble. I've learned a lot from many musicians I've played with. Humpback whales in Hawaii, nightingales in Berlin, lyrebirds in Australia, beluga whales in Russia. Oh, it's very loud over here. This is late August, this is insect time. This is a hydrophone. It's an underwater microphone. It picks up sound underwater. And there can be all kinds of creatures. A whole human interest in noise as music. Technologies that make washes of sounds, distorted guitars, electronic instruments. It all comes back to this world of bug sound. Our whole biology and culture evolved in the presence of all this. That might got someone the idea to start having a rhythm, shake something. These layers of rhythms. One is going, another's going, and then the katydids are going, There were bugs on this planet long before there were these more complicated creatures like birds and us. So this is like some of the oldest music you'll ever hear. Bugs are our ever-distant ancestors. We're hearing some connection to the voice of the ancestors. The insects remind us where we came from.
Well, that video was entitled Summer Symphony and was directed by David's friend, Louis Rapkin.
Louis Rapkin, yeah.
And that's available online. If you check davidrothenberg.net, you'll be able to find that. But let me introduce our guest. David Rothenberg is a composer, performer, author, naturalist, and he refers to himself as an interspecies musician, which John and I have been really enjoying that. We actually want to join you in that title if we can somehow. But David is a professor, distinguished professor at the New Jersey Institute of Technology, and author of many books. First of all, we'd like to welcome you to Ars Vitalis. This is a unique event. Usually we're in a chamber music hall, but we are in Nature's Chamber Music Hall today, and this is perfectly apropos for the type of things you do. So, David, if you don't mind, could you tell our general audience about how did you become an interspecies musician? What are your origins? I know you're a jazz improviser, jazz musician. How did you get here to where we are today?
I started getting interested in the possibility that other species out there besides human beings were also musicians, were making music. They were also improvising, and that if you're used to improvising with the motley crew of strange human musicians, you might run across, maybe they come from different parts of the world. You can't talk to them, you can make music together. Why not try that with other species that you cannot speak to? I started getting interested in this in high school when I happened to grow up in Connecticut, and I lived close to where I think one of the pioneers of this kind of music lives, Paul Winter, saxophonist, and he is still out there making music with whales and birds and wolves and connecting music and conservation and Earth Day. And so I'm going to shout out to Paul Winter, setting me on this path many years ago.
And the connection to jazz. I know you're an improviser. Obviously, a lot of what you do is improvisation with jazz. So was this parallel training in jazz and jazz improvisation?
Yeah, I was always interested in that. The first jazz I got interested in was kind of jazz on the edge of the standard things. I like the music like Oregon. I like Ornette Coleman and Jan Garbarek and Keith Jarrett. A lot of European jazz associated with the ECM label when I was getting interested. So it was from the beginning a kind of side of jazz that was maybe closer to classical music. Yeah. And I don't know how I do know how I learned about that music. Another interesting, fortunate thing growing up in Westport, Connecticut, is there was always a famous jazz record store there. Was called Sally's Place, and for many decades, Sally had this incredible collection of jazz albums, and there's quite a few well-known jazz musicians who also got interested in jazz from this store, being in that part of Connecticut. And that's where all this kind of unusual music back in the day when it was harder to find such music, that's where I heard it and got these records.
When did you first become fascinated with birds?
I think even earlier I was interested in birds when my family moved from New York City to Connecticut, and we lived by this river in this little shack-like house in its early days. And I was often outside listening to birds, walking around, bird watching, and learning about what was out there.
So bird watching to what degree?
I was never an extreme bird watcher, but I just liked knowing about these birds, listening to what they're doing, identifying them. And then when I heard there was this jazz musician, Paul Winter, who played with all these animals, I said, oh, I want to do that. And then I started doing it. And then in high school, I spent one summer watching birds in California, near Mono Lake in the Sierra Nevada. And then I, took out my clarinet and play along with the birds and spend time.
Oh, that's great. So what's the first bird that you fell in love with, so to speak?
The first bird I
Good call.
musically fell in love with, for many years I did none of this. And then a few decades later, I got back interested when I started learning about the work of the Canadian composer R. Murray Schafer,
Yes.
also a man in his late 80s today. And he is the founder of Soundscape Studies. He wrote a book called Tuning of the World, where he presented the whole world as a kind of composition. Even all this wind that's messing up our voices, it's all music. And Murray Schafer, there was a conference for his 60th birthday in Banff in Canada. I was there. I met so many people interested in music and nature. I didn't realize there was a whole world of people. One of them was Michael Pestle, an art professor. At the time, he was at Chatham College. I hope he's listening in right now. He's in Connecticut somewhere now. And he said, you've got to come to Pittsburgh, to the National Aviary, and play with the birds there. That's cool. There's a National Aviary. It's in Pittsburgh. And there I met the white-crested laughing thrush. This is the first bird I really played along with. This bird really wanted to interact with clarinet sound. And I said, there's something you could do here. There's a whole world that could be explored. That was the beginning. I think it was like 21 years ago.
Okay, cool. Can you say the name of that bird
The
again?
white-crested laughing thrush.
Nice.
They're also in the Bronx Zoo. You can find them in a lot of zoos. The thing about the laughing thrush is that the males and females both sing. They sing back and forth, kind of complicated duets. So when they hear a sound, they kind of want to engage. And this is what you'll find. Some animals want to engage, others don't want to engage. Some are just there, and you're just one more voice in the midst of the
Beautiful.
sound.
Is VJ there? VJ, can we get you in for a little dialogue?
Yes, absolutely. I'm
Good to see you, VJ.
Yeah. Well, I'm nice and warm where I am with a mug of warm coffee.
We are actually not in New Jersey. We're in Alberta, Canada. We decided.
I understand, right?
Norway.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Well, it's definitely great to hear all of this. Mentioning the book, David, of course, was one of the first people that came to mind when we thought about discussing environmental sound artists. He has such a unique perspective on so many things related to the environment and the fusion of music along with that too. So it's great to see you in this environment again.
Yeah, great to see you being nice and warm. Your fluffy biodynamic headphones on. But Environmental Sound Artist is a great book. I learned about so many cool musicians and sound creators I didn't know about when I got my copy of that book. You should do volume 2.
Yeah.
David, what about improvisation? Obviously, I think when you interact with things that are nonverbal, the Jews you can't talk to in the ensemble. So, if you're training in improvisation or your skills in improvisation, I guess that's a critical element of what you do.
Well, I always thought it was most interesting to make music suddenly, immediately, together with people. And I guess I come out of the jazz tradition, but not so much the more narrowly defined jazz tradition as some people try to define it these days. But the idea that I think jazz tradition was open to all kinds of other influences in an immediate way. Other kinds of music weren't. Like when Tony Scott, the clarinetist, decided to play with sitar players, Indian musicians. Immediately what they did was still jazz, but it wasn't Indian music, which has a lot of rules, and you break those rules, you're out. And jazz is kind of open. And I think it still is. It still, you can make a lot of things that are part of jazz, although we're in the age today that it's said all these genres are breaking down.
Yeah.
It's just
The barriers are melting.
But improvisation is still this important part of many kinds of music that, you know, shouldn't be overlooked, shouldn't be underemphasized in any kinds of music. Even in opera, there should be room for improvisation. In classical music, in the old days, improvisation was a big part of it. People would always improvise their cadenzas. Now they
Cadenzas,
write them
definitely.
down. You have to make them exactly the way they're supposed to be.
Yeah, there's a spontaneity. I'm trying to think of this. There's an old Hebrew word, Tehillim maybe, or
Tehillim doesn't mean
Tehillim?
something, yeah.
It's something
Yeah.
about it being in the moment.
Right,
like
yeah.
a spontaneous.
Like the title of the Steve Reich piece, which
Yeah.
I think is all written down, but it does have some of that quality.
The irony.
There's a beautiful bird up there.
Oh, I think it's a robin. And the robins were asked to be part of this show. We've been negotiating with their union, and one of them, I think,
The contract's been signed, and they will be jamming
Right.
later. Actually,
Right,
that'll be
yeah.
about 7:15. We'll be getting
They're
there.
also a little upset that it's freezing cold and windy here. It should be warm. It's April.
I want to segue towards some of the we did prepare with several site visits some videos and audio to show David's work in more detail, and the first two elements we're going to share with people are going to be things that involve the hydrophone.
Right.
So if you could just give us a 1-minute overview of the hydrophone, how it fits into your concept of music making,
Yeah.
the idea of getting underwater and getting sonic material from
Well,
underwater.
You saw a hydrophone briefly in Lewis's fine video about music, because under the surface of a pond or a lake that we have right here, there's all these amazing sounds that nobody ever hears, because you don't hear them above water. They can be insects, they can be plants, they can be fish. And so my latest project is called The Secret Sounds of Ponds. It's trying to be a book in music, live with pond sounds, together with writing about the mysteries of the deep and the idea of the difference between plant and animal, between rhythm and event, melody coming from these sounds. And so we wanted to try the hydrophone out here in this pond. Is it a pond or a lake?
I think it's a lake by name, but I'll give you a pond. I like
mostly
pond.
we heard a lot of sounds of water and fish, which I don't often hear. Mysterious fish were grunting and grumbling. And so we played live. I played live with the pond a few weeks ago on a thankfully warmer day. And on warmer days, there's more pond activity. And so you're going to see some of that and hear some of that right now.
So let's go ahead and make a transition. Now we're going to listen to I call this the pond listener.
This is the case when technology enhances your connection to nature, like you're picking up on things that are there, otherwise you can't see, like a microscope, telescope, binoculars. And humans are always looking to find some meaning in the sounds and the patterns. So what are these creatures, or it's just water moving? You know, it's sometimes hard to know. We see a lot of activity. So some of this is some of these same creatures. We heard at least one call from some animal. But there's probably a lot more that you're going to hear when you listen to this later. Pull out all the noise. Look at the image of the sound. I can make a video of this file in a sonogram and play it. People can see it if anyone wants that material. These are sounds the pond listener lives for. Interestingly enough, they sound a lot like the sound of gravitational waves. The earliest known evidence the universe exists is just a little chirp.
It looks like us.
That was the pond listener, yeah.
Or maybe it's just
We're going to
photograph.
transition to one more video that involves the hydrophone, but this one's going to involve processed sound where David actually manipulates the raw material. So our second video with the pond listener.
There you go.
There's something big over there. Wow. What I love about that one is there's the process sound at the end, which when you pick up the iPad, that haunting quality, and some of the images, of course, are quite beautiful as well. Could you tell the audience a little bit about what you're doing when you picked up the iPad there? The hydrophone is obviously the sound of the underwater pond itself, but what's going on
The hydrophone's bringing in underwater pond sounds, mostly from plants at this point. But the iPad is a great instrument to play. With the touch screen, you control all these synthesizer apps that do different kinds of things. There's one called Animoog, based on the Moog synthesizers, and you sort of move on the screen, changing the note, changing the qualities of the timbre. And it's an instrument that only works with the touch screen. You have to play it this way, otherwise it doesn't exist. There's another one called Sampler, which doesn't have an E in it, SAMPLR, and that's you sample sounds and then moving your fingers on the screen, you change how long they play, what their pitch is, and you mess with them. So you turn the screen into an instrument you play.
But you locked into pond sounds. Now, just for the
I used a lot of pond sounds.
That was the pond sound itself that you were then
I used the
processing
pond sounds, either from the pond right here, others that I'd saved from other pond days. You can have them ready to go. And so what it does is gives you this way to interact with the machine by touching the screen. It's very playable directly out in the field. Whereas if you're playing a computer, it's a lot harder. You have pressing keys. It's like you're in the office. But the touching the screen is more like magical and strange.
No, it's expressive. It was very expressive performance. Just even the physicality of it, they'll go watching you play, let alone hearing you play.
You can express yourself even through these machines where you're touching into thin air. You can make things happen.
There was a little dance going on there too. That was nice. I noticed. Just a little, shuffle in your.
Yeah, you have to move. You can't just sit still.
Yeah.
We have to sit still because otherwise the mics make too much noise now. Otherwise, we do not want to sit still. It's cold here. We want to dance. And you guys, you're watching this video. You're missing things going on here. There was an osprey going down and grabbing fish. There was a great blue heron flying around. Like this is the time of evening when stuff starts to happen.
Yeah, we're freezing, but we're getting a lot of drama here for sure on the campus.
Yeah.
Just another quick question. Did you have loops playing in that last piece as
There's
well?
a few loops from these pond sounds, and they're all like irregular. Like you turn them on and off. You record a motion, and then it plays for a while, and then you add another one to it. So rather than preset in time kind of loops that we're sort of used to, these are sort of uneven loops.
Wonderful.
Like the loops of the world, or rhythms of nature, are regular, but they're also a little irregular at the same time.
Well, David, I know you work here. We did two solo pieces. Well, you actually say solo as the human being solo, but there was an ensemble as well. It was the pond and other things. But you've worked with other musicians live, and having John as our co-host. John is himself an accomplished percussionist and very interested in world music, and so we did take up an opportunity to go up into the skywalk. There is a structure here that goes from the lodge, the main building, to the cabin, the new classroom building that takes you through the treetops. And David and John got inspired and set up and performed a duet up in the skywalk. And we did record that, and I think that also captured something of the beauty and the ambience of this space. So this is we call it the Skywalk Sessions duet.
We're looking at right
You can just look right up there and
Yeah,
you can see the
you could come around
skywalk.
and take
It's
a look
just
at
so cool.
This is the Kean Skylands Skywalk.
I have a feeling it's never known today. No one's ever allowed.
It's so pristine.
But we will be. Everyone's going to be allowed. This is the opening.
We're going to do our last performance
This, for example,
for
was
the
never
evening
here.
on the Skywalk Live. Let's do it, gents.
Look at this over here. Wow.
Yeah.
My goodness.
Built during the pandemic. Never open. It will be open soon.
So, David, nightingales. You have an interest in those, of course.
Nightingale is an amazing singing bird. Unfortunately, we don't have them in North America.
Right.
What's great about them is they sing a phrase and leave a space for you to join in.
And so where do you go?
Go to Europe.
Germany?
Going to Berlin. Now they just instituted a curfew in Berlin. No one's allowed out at night. So I don't know if it's happening this year.
Okay. And if you plan a trip there, though, and I mean, you sort of have to time out the weather. And...
Oh, you need to know, this time of year is when they come out. But also in Berlin, it's not unusual to have a super cold day like today. And the nightingale.
Because they're mad.
It's just too cold. It's not inspired
Yeah.
to sing. Like it's a prime singing time of year.
Now, what
Birds at dawn and dusk. It might just be totally quiet today.
insects get quiet too in the cold, don't they?
Yeah, the pitch goes down and they get slower. But they're used to the cold, like in the autumn after the summer warmth, and summer evenings of katydids or cicadas during the day. Hearing some sounds though. What's going on?
So we are overlooking the lake at the Skywalk.
There's some mourning doves in the forest.
When we were here several weeks ago, we had prepared some video with a good dialogue David had done with sparrows. So I think we're going to run a little bit of the video.
You're playing the video. We're going to
yeah, it was an introduction. I think it's an introductory video. So we're going to run an introductory video on some things about the song sparrow and the duet that David had that day.
Yeah, you can run the song sparrow story, or we can do it live. They're very aggressive. The song sparrow, like, each male knows up to 25 different songs, and they like trade back and forth. Sometimes they share songs with other males. Sometimes they compete with them. And this was first studied by this woman, Margaret Morse Knights, in the 1920s in Columbus, Ohio. She just got to know each bird by their songs. They're very distinctive. So we're hearing one phrase now. This guy probably knows, depending on how experienced he is, between 8 and 25. So she learned all the birds in her neighborhood. They came back every year, and she wrote about them. And she wrote 2 600-page books that are still in print. Studies in the life history of the song sparrow. She was a student of Wallace Craig along with Conrad Lorenz. They were the star students. And it's an amazing book. And it's about this bird.
Final segment, we're going to play out to the dusk, to the sunset. Actually, we're going to get hit to the sunset. So, David,
sun is there.
This is your last duet. We're going to say goodbye to Earth Day as the sun sets. So I'm going to leave you to a solo clarinet and the beautiful grounds of the Kean Skylands campus. Thank you, everyone, for joining us tonight. This is David.
The herons, the mourning doves, they're all out there.
David Rothenberg, clarinet with nature.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in. Thanks, Matthew, John, Robin, Kean Skylands, and the great state of Jersey. Here we are, a day of winter in the middle of spring, birds singing behind the wind. Thanks, VJ, putting it all together. And see you out in the wilds of music and sound and the warmer days to come.